All right, 4 o'clock now. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this Victiso PL session supporting older adolescent arrivals, navigating the space between school and adulthood. My name is Danny Wong, and I'm a member of the Victiso committee. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we were all meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present and the young people that we serve and extend this acknowledgement to the lands on which you join us from today. I would also like to acknowledge the rich lessons that we as educators can learn from Aboriginal peoples who have created and maintained links through language that have lasted for tens of thousands of years. Just some housekeeping before we start. This session will be recorded and made available on the website. If you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A chat. They will be answered by the presenter after the session. If you encounter any technical issues, please use the chat function to talk to Victiso staff. We value your feedback, so please use the survey link to tell us what you think of the session. Now let's have a look who's in the room. Should have got a poll. Lovely. So half of the attendees today were from the government sector and from adult sector. Wonderful. Most of us secondary adult, yeah, fits the topic. And we have many people from regional area. Wonderful. And a good number of us have 10+ years experience, very experienced cohort. Lovely. Let me now introduce the presenters. It's a pleasure to introduce Lindsay Hogg and her colleague Pham. Lindsay is a professional learning officer in the Foundation House School Support Program. Lindsay has a background in developing and facilitating professional learning to support capability building in schools and organizations working with children, young people, and families of refugee backgrounds. And Thao is a school support officer in Foundational House Education and the Early Years Program. Thao has a background in EAL teaching secondary school students and supporting professional learning communities. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Just as you were talking, Danny, my computer just asked me if I would like to do an update, which involved restarting my computer right at that moment. I was like, not right now. But thank you so much for having us and welcome everybody. It's really lovely to see you all here, and also big thanks because this hour after a full day of work is really precious, and so we really appreciate you dedicating this time to us today. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. It would be great to see where you're all joining from today. If you're able to use the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner of your picture just to change your name in order to include your school or organisation, it'll be really great to be able to scan and see that who is joining us today. Thank you very much to Danny for the warm welcome. I'll just share my slides so we can get started. There was already a beautiful acknowledgement from Danny today to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands. Just want to pause and also acknowledge that you might be joining us on land outside of Victoria today. So welcome to any interstate participants. We would love to hear where you're working from and which land you're on today. I also like to share this beautiful map that you can get from an organisation called Acknowledge This. And the beautiful map can be found in printed form, as I've got in a poster as well, if you would like it for your learning spaces. So today's session is focusing on supporting new arrivals as they're navigating that space between school and adulthood, a very beautiful and wonderful time that I feel very privileged to have had experience in working with young people at this lovely point. But the content for today is really set up around professional learning. We're going to have some presentations. There'll be a couple of discussion points where you might like to contribute to the chat. And just really acknowledging that in this space, there's going to be lots of voices, lots of expertise to draw on. We would love to hear from you in the chat if you'd like to share anything. And if you are thinking of a young person or family in our discussions today, please just remember to de-identify in order to maintain confidentiality. We also want to recognise that primarily the work of Foundation House focuses on survivors of torture and trauma. So majority of the people that we're working with have a refugee or refugee-like experience. And we acknowledge that through the spaces that we're working in, we may also be working with people with lived and living experiences of trauma. And that could be participants, facilitators, and also we want to extend that acknowledgement for the staff, children, young people and families in the spaces where we work. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Foundation House, it is quite a large organisation with multiple sites across Victoria. The organisation was primarily originally set up as for counselling and advocacy services in order to support survivors of torture and trauma. We in the Education and Early Years team are funded by the Department of Education to offer services to government, Catholic and independent schools and those people working with schools. The work that we do primarily is around organisational development, professional learning. We work in regions supporting schools mostly through secondary consultations, professional learning. We have a 2-year refugee education support program that schools can get involved in. We have a whole website full of resources, tip sheets, frameworks, case studies, and lots of advice through our Schools in for Refugees website. We also have a statewide MEA network for all of our multicultural education aides and bicultural workers in schools, and a refugee education and empowerment network called REAM, which is also available to join. And also through our team, we can support schools who may need to offer referrals for their students to support referrals to counselling and advocacy services. So we can point you towards where to find more information about that after the session. So in this hour of power, we are going to spend a little bit of time reflecting on the needs of young people from refugee backgrounds and the impact of trauma on wellbeing and learning. This is not a deep dive into refugee experiences, but just to let you know, we do run professional learning that has quite a lot of content around refugee experiences and the impacts of trauma on learning and wellbeing. But today we're just going to touch on a few of those in specifically thinking about the context of working with young people aged 12 to about 24. We'll talk about the settlement protective factors that are going to support settlement for our older adolescent arrivals and how these can be strengthened in order to support student wellbeing, also engagement and achievement. And through this, we're going to be calling to mind like what your role is in being able to support older adolescents in their learning and wellbeing as we go through. So we'll be posing some questions and asking you to think on that as we go. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Thao. Thanks, Thao.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone. I'm very grateful to be here today, sharing this space with you and to acknowledge the lived experience that's in this room as well. We'll begin by briefly considering the very diverse learning, well-being and social needs of your student community. And we're looking at this diagram because while there are many overlaps and commonalities in experiences, especially between our English as additional language learners, as well as our refugee and refugee-like background young people, we also want to acknowledge that there is as much diversity within these groups as there are between them. So just as our English as an additional language students require additional language supports, our refugee background students and those who may have refugee-like experiences may also need specific interventions to address the experiences of disruptive schooling, as well as trauma that they may be processing as they arrive in Australia. In addition, those who may arrive on temporary visas face an additional level of uncertainty, and this adds to the layer of complexity. If we cast our minds back to our own adolescence and the challenges that we experienced When we consider the additional learning needs as well as the well-being and social needs of young people from refugee and refugee-like backgrounds, it's quite understandable that we will need to consider additional supports in order to support them to reach their full potential. So this may include, for example, additional information, time, and support to understand careers information and pathways options. There may be additional time required to reach the equivalent level of academic English as their peers, as well as the requirement for support around study skills, digital literacy, and so on. Many of you will have experience working with diverse learners from across these three groups. So we welcome you to add to the chat some examples from your own experiences of the unique learning, well-being, and social needs of your student community. And just a word on definition too. When we speak about refugee and refugee-like background students, our experience as an organisation, as a team, is predominantly focused on this group. And without knowing the precise visa or the journeys that young people have taken to get to Australia, acknowledging that there are many pathways to arriving here, we may speak about refugee-like backgrounds as a more inclusive, encompassing term. So now when we consider the diversity of people's pre-arrival experiences, this may include before they had to escape their country of origin if they have arrived as refugees. And this may look like stable, settled lives in their home country with really established and high quality education systems, with families undertaking professional jobs prior to disruptions as a result of conflict. For others, it may include living across multiple generations in a refugee camp for most or all of their lives. And refugee camps may vary based on their geography as well as how long they have been there. Many of our young people might have spent significant time living in urban centres in more difficult makeshift situations where they may have had to undertake work to support their families and additional responsibilities beyond their years. So coming to Australia with a plethora of experiences and challenges, we have to acknowledge too that a key part of these experiences is the underpinning valuing of education and the continuing commitment of families to continue schooling, regardless of what that might look like. So this diverse impact on education may include students experiencing disruptions to their schooling through destroyed infrastructure. It may include denial of a right to education if they or their families come from a persecuted minority. On the left, you'll see an image of students at the American University of Afghanistan prior to the fall of Kabul. As a result of the conflict, the university was forced to go online, whereas on the right, you'll see a group of Palestinian students studying at a refugee camp in Turkey. So many students may have had to transit through a number of different countries, refugee camps, as well as urban centres before arriving in Australia. So what we see here is that common valuing of education, but also that the experience of education is disrupted to some degree, regardless of circumstances of how people have arrived in Australia. To help us understand a little bit more about what the impact of that pre-arrival experience might mean for a refugee background young person, we need to consider perhaps a definition of trauma that will help us to support young people and their families. This definition here works for the purposes of our discussion today. It comes from the Australian Childhood Foundation, and it defines trauma as the emotional, psychological, and physiological residue left over from the heightened stress that accompanies experiences of threat, violence, or other life-changing events. We want to reiterate too that trauma and how it's experienced and processed is hugely subjective. And we also need to consider the age as well as the developmental stage of the young person at the time that they experienced these events. This can have an impact on how they are able to process, seek help, as well as to be able to resettle in Australia. And it depends on the support that they're able to access. For adolescents in particular, where we're still supporting adolescents to develop their sense of identity, but we also want to acknowledge and celebrate the multiple strengths that they bring, regardless of the journeys that they've undertaken. So, to help us consider the strengths as well as the challenges of these prior experiences, at Foundation House, we utilize a framework called the Trauma Recovery Framework. Broadly speaking, this underpins all of our work as well as our training with schools. And the very first column highlights the diversity of experiences that young people and their families might have undergone. The various acts of persecution and human rights violations may vary, but fundamentally, what all refugee background young people and their families share is that they will have experienced at least one, if not multiple examples of what you see on the left-hand side. And these have often lasting social and psychological impacts, including a sense of chronic fear, helplessness, loss of agency and control, all the way to a deep-seated sense of humiliation and shame. What you're most likely to see in your work, in classrooms, in wellbeing spaces, are the manifestations of this trauma. It may look like anxiety, as well as avoidant behavior, and a loss of trust, especially in authority figures. But what we want to reiterate is your role in supporting a sense of hope and recovery for young people and their families. And these recovery goals, including restoring safety, enhancing control, especially for older adolescents, goes hand in hand with a growing sense of autonomy and independence, and especially within learning environments where you'll be considering, alongside the young people, pathways as well as choices about their future. It sits really well with promoting a sense of greater agency, belonging, as well as a sense of justice, encouraging young people to participate in leadership opportunities, as well as in developing safe relationships with their peers, as well as with their teachers and workers. And we want to also emphasize that this is an ongoing and dynamic process that's different for all young people that we work with.
Thanks, Thao. We've just done a very quick summary of some of those refugee experiences, and we will share at the end a link where you can access more professional learning in this space. But just to add on to this, we really focus on the recovery goals as ways that we can support and meet young people wherever we find them or wherever they're at, you know, with the goal of helping them to move forward. So we also want to acknowledge, you know, the refugee experiences have a particular overlay in terms of laying over adolescent development. So this quote from the UNHCR, the process of identity formation, which is part of adolescence, may be particularly complex for young people being affected by the overlay of the refugee experience, cultural adjustment, and the practical demands of resettlement. So we want to acknowledge that, you know, with all of our young people that we're working with, at any one time, they've got a lot of the pieces to their developing identity and sense of self. You know, their beliefs, their gender expression, how they communicate, you know, their access to education, income, ability, work, family. And family is really important, you know, for young people. At the centre of this development is their developing values and beliefs about themselves and about the world. And this is where we really start to think about where we have influence over this. all of the experiences that young people go through within their family, within school and work, within community and society, and within culture are shaping not only the young person's identity, but how they see themselves, their beliefs about themselves and about the world around them. And we pause here because this is quite significant when we're thinking about the role that young people are often playing within the family while they're going through this close process of identity formation. They are often the ones who are supporting their families with settlement. So, for example, when I worked as a careers teacher of newly arrived young people at Noble Park English Language School in Hampton Park, and often the young people were simultaneously getting an education, but also attending appointments with family and translating, or maybe, helping at night with, filling out forms, possibly doing some part-time work to support the family here and potentially family members overseas. So there's just a lot going on for our young people, as well as navigating all of the complexity of their identity formation that you can see on the screen now. So when we think about what this looks like, and we're going to start to think about some strategies now around what are some things that we can do. When we're looking at some of the risk factors, we're talking about what are the things that are going to make settlement more challenging for a young person or a family, and what are some of the protective factors, the things that are going to make it easier. So first and foremost, we want to acknowledge that one of the challenges for both adults, adult family members and young people is the grief and loss or despair about loved ones overseas. Young people and families might be safe here and starting their settlement journey, but often, there's separation with loved ones that can continue, and that can put on a certain amount of pressure on young people and families as they're navigating their new space while still thinking and considering the needs of others. For adults and parents, some of the risk factors in settlement might be around difficulties learning English due to caring responsibilities or financial responsibilities, often grappling with that loss of livelihood or identity, potentially having, great careers, in their country of origin and then coming here and then fighting to get their qualifications, recognised, and then also that challenges in maintaining culture and language within the next generation. Risk factors for children and young people, the perception by children of parents as out of touch with the new culture. There could be a bit of a shift in terms of power balance, as children and young people are learning English really quickly and supporting families, that can lead to some intergenerational challenges there. Other risk factors include things like, lack of in-class EAL supports or limited supports in transitions at those really crucial points, or potentially experiencing racism or discrimination at work or school or in the community. So now I'd like for you to think a little bit about the protective factors. What are some of the things that are making settlement easier for our young people and families? Focusing for now on young people, we know that the opportunities for positive connections with peers is something that's going to make a huge difference. Today, we were lucky enough to hear from a student panel of young people at Noble Park English Language School, and they said one of the things that really helped them transition the most was kindness from other students and supporting them and feeling well supported in the new school that they're in. We know other protective factors are things like good interpersonal skills, having that sense of belonging, some agency around decision making and having some control, and programs to meet learning needs and address gaps. And the things that schools are doing all the time and do really well, but worth mentioning, things like our inclusive policies, attitudes to diversity, use of interpreters and translations, and engaging parents and carers in students at home learning. We know from the research that families that are engaged in their young person's education and learning are going to contribute to really positive outcomes academically. So maybe just to pause for a moment for you to consider which of these settlement protective factors could you contribute to in your role or organisation? Or what are the ones that jump out at you, maybe just even quietly to yourself, that you feel like your school or programs that you're running are really supportive in terms of meeting the needs of settlement. So I'll just give you a moment to think about that. You can pop it in the chat Just going to do a quick time check. Okay. Okay, hopefully that gave you a moment to consider what influence that you have over supporting good settlement through some of those protective factors. What we'd like to do now is share with you a framework. Thao, I don't know if you have this link handy from the run sheet, but I've put a link to the National Youth Settlement Framework in there that maybe Thao can share with you in the chat. So my end is the Multicultural Youth Advocacy Network, and they have put together Australia's first and only National Youth Settlement Framework that provides good practice strategies and support in order to help young people who are newly arrived from refugee and migrant backgrounds in order to have successful settlement and achieve active citizenship. And this is where we start to think about what are all those extra things that we can be doing to support young people as they navigate that space between school and adulthood. So Mayan established that there are 4 key areas that we can look at in order to support young people here, and that's their economic, social, and civic participation, underpinned by a focus on personal well-being. So economic participation includes things like supporting education and employment pathways, helping with work, finding work, even stable and secure housing is considered economic participation here because you've got to have a safe place to live. And also developing not only English language skills, but digital literacy skills as well. Social participation acknowledges the important role of supporting young people to connect with their community, connect with their peers, and to build what we call bridging and bonding networks. So bonding networks helps them to connect to people in their own community, and bridging networks helps them to build that social capital. So for example, when I had Year 10 work experience, I had multiple people that I could go and ask for support to help me get a work experience placement. How do we support young people who may not have that social capital to build those bridging networks, through programs and targeted effort to support them to make those connections in an area that they're interested in learning more about? Civic participation looks at how we support young people to realise their rights, whether that's civic rights, political, or humanitarian rights. We look at how they can participate, within their communities, volunteering, and getting to know their local communities. And of course, all of this work is underpinned by personal well-being, because we acknowledge that the economic, social, and civic participation can't happen without well-being being at the core. So personal well-being around health, physical, mental, and emotional health, looking at how social relationships are driving factors in how good a person feels, and also those intergenerational relationships and how important they are. So we really encourage you to have a look at the National Youth Settlement Framework. There's a lot of good practice information in there around how you can support good citizenship, but also how you as an organisation or school can wrap around the young person and start to think about some of those opportunities for helping them connect with their community and start to feel like they are active citizens. One thing that we want to pull out of that is around the wellbeing support, acknowledging that young people from refugee backgrounds may require specialised support due to their age and circumstances. We know that young people who are pre-arrival, if they're growing up and spending some time in refugee camps, for example, pre-arrival, that we know with recent developments around restrictions and withdrawal of funding, that health people are arriving in Australia with reduced health with reduced quality of health and increase for health concerns like malnutrition, simply due to lack of resources in environments like in refugee camps, for example. Also, we want to acknowledge that as young people arrive, it's really important to support them to develop their knowledge and understanding about human rights, including their reproductive rights, anticipating student-initiated conversations regarding sexuality, gender, and sexual health, and providing supportive information is going to be key at that time. Facilitating student access to GPs, and whatever we can do to have those connections to really practical support services, and providing opportunities for students to discuss and be supported with the stress of their studies and how to manage expectations and aspirations. We know that a lot of young people that are coming from refugee backgrounds might be the first in their family to complete formal schooling, maybe the first to go on to tertiary education. And with that comes a lot of internal and sometimes external pressure in order to do really well. So how we can support that and acknowledge that very real experience of wanting to do really well, but how we can manage that. It might not also be recognised through cultural language around stress or anxiety and other mental health concerns. I think supporting young people with open information is really valuable. We also want to acknowledge that schools can't do everything, and so linking students to relevant services and agencies within your local area is going to be really effective. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Thao to give you an example of a program that sort of bridges that gap between school and adult life. So over to you, Thao. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I think based on what you just shared in the previous slide as well, if we refer back to one of the key recovery goals around mitigating the sense of shame and embarrassment, it's really important that we normalize help seeking as well. And we refer students to services and agencies through warm referrals, through an explanation of processes and what to expect, so that young people feel really well supported from the beginning through to the end of their engagement with external services. And I think really reiterating too that settlement is not a linear journey, that those risk and protective factors can result in moments of the journey feeling like the young person is regressing, or perhaps a sense of frustration on the part of young people that they're not making as much progress, especially in terms of their language acquisition, their academic progress, their ability to meet their own highly aspirational goals, which we want to support and encourage. And I think all of those things come together in programs that are really targeted towards refugee and refugee-like young people in particular, and those who are newly arrived are especially vulnerable. And an example that we have here is the You Can Too program, which comes from Foundation House. It's been going for many years now, and it really connects those key goals that come from the framework that Lindsay has shared. It promotes economic, social, as well as civic participation. And underpinning that is the importance placed on emotional and social well-being. So essentially, it's a 16-week program that aims to increase language acquisition, social connectedness, as well as promoting mental health and well-being for young people. It does this through the development of work skills in a very structured program, and young people participate alongside their peers of the same age and experience. So it helps to build that connection to peers as well as to service providers and teachers. Young people are supported to undertake part-time work experience. They're provided with social support as well as psychosocial education. They are connected to services and business mentors, strengthening those relationships and connections to their broader community. And where curriculum isn't catering specifically for new arrivals and refugee background young people specifically, we might consider not just programs like You Can Too, but a whole range of other services in your community that can complement the work that you already do within your schools and your learning environments. So, what we might do in a minute is to share with you some examples of services, but we'll let the young people share with you what some of the benefits of participating in a program like You Can Too can bring.
My name is Thao. I have been in Australia for 2 years, and I was born in Hogg, capital city of Chin in Myanmar. I think Australia people is very friendly. One of the most difficult things for me is speaking English. Yep, that's very hard, and finding a job.
So, welcome to You Can Too, everybody. It's great to see you here today. Young people of refugee background come to Australia with a whole range of experiences, and what we know is they will all have experienced trauma, disruptions to their lives, disrupted education. They've probably lost family, friends. They've experienced terrible things. It's very difficult to settle in a new country. So we developed You Can Too to assist them to integrate and settle well. It's set 1 day a week for 16 weeks. So it's a very comprehensive program.
Because of the You Can Too program, I'm very improved my speaking skills. I think last week I had an appointment and I went to my appointment and they asked me some questions and I answered them and they were like, oh, how did you improve your English? How? We share about ourselves and we share about our cultures, our experience before coming to Australia.
The You Can Too journey is amazing. I mean, you see young people come into the group in the very beginning. They gradually get to know one another very well. They get to know us as facilitators very well. They get to know the volunteers very well. There's a lot of sharing of experiences.
We are doing resume in my class now, and that's very helpful. And also now I'm looking for a part-time job, and I'm going to use that resume.
They're all very keen to learn about work in Australia. They get the opportunity to do part-time work experience.
I couldn't imagine that I can do that work experience. And when I finished, I'm really, really proud of myself, and I did it. When I was in Yangon, my dad called us every day and he told us Australia is like heaven. And we were really excited to come here. So yeah, I love it.
I think the lovely thing about a program like that is that it's done in collaboration with community and with the young people. And we know in our roles across the different sectors, those of you around the screen, that what you bring through your warmth, through the positive relationships that you build is so pivotal to ensuring that young people feel supported. But these programs also offer young people experiences of success that help them to feel more confident and encourage them to be able to continue to participate in the community and challenge themselves through civic engagement. So additional examples of similar programs, and we know they look so different depending on your geographical location. In regional centres, the support can be quite limited, but I think through collaboration and reaching out to organisations, we can coordinate our efforts so we're not working in isolation. The examples on the screen are other Melbourne-based organisations and programs, but if you reach out to our school support team, we'll be able to help you to connect with other services and programs in your own particular location. What these examples on screen have in common is that they support a range of participation, including the social and civic participation that is so vital to building a young person's sense of belonging, identity, as well as their connection to their new community. So examples of these programs and what they do include an emphasis on building youth leadership, skills that they can experience through internships, public speaking training, including public speaking engagements in real situations, advisory groups and advocacy opportunities. So they have an opportunity to speak to their own lived experience, their own skills and strengths, as well as to be able to advocate on behalf of others from a similar background. Through mentoring and entrepreneurship, young people are able to learn about all the possible careers, pathways, and options that they have. Youth-led activities encourage that sense of agency, empowerment, and autonomy in being able to make decisions and engage meaningfully in determining their own futures. And it can be supported by the opportunity to organize and facilitate activities, camps, social connections, as well as connecting with peers through sports and recreation, linking both the mental as well as the physical well-being. And of course, opportunities for volunteering to build pathways, work experience, and to connect with services, businesses, and agencies that can offer young people economic participation as well. So I wonder if in your experience, you've connected with similar programs and whether you would like to share them in the chat as a means to supporting others in this group to learn more about what's on offer for young people, especially those who are newly arrived or from a refugee background.
Thanks, Thao. Great idea to harvest from the group other programs that you've experienced or you've worked with in supporting students to connect with. I know we have a few interstate participants as well. We'd love to hear about other opportunities around Australia because I think it's great to see what's on offer for us to learn from.
I can share from Queensland if that helps.
Thanks, Jackie.
My name's Jackie. I'm from Milperra State High School. We're an intensive English language and settlement high school for newly arrived families. We work closely with quite a few organisations, Multicultural Australia, QPAST, the Queensland African Community Council. I don't know, there's so many really good ones out there.
What do you feel is the benefit for engaging external programs in addition to what you're offering in the school, Jackie?
Oh, so many things. So, for example, our Queensland African Community Council, they are mentors and from the communities that our students are from. So it's great for them to see themselves in other, see people like them that have had the similar journey to them and who are doing great things and to be able to see where they're headed, I guess. And some of them are our past students, which is really fantastic for our students to see. I think the benefit for other organisations of working with our young people brings a lot of value to them as well. I think that's always important to note. It's definitely never a one-way street. Our students bring so much value to our community. And I guess for us, just providing space and time for our students to settle and to get used to a very new environment. I could talk forever, but I'm going to stop now.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks very much. I love that. yeah, representation is really important. You know, you can't be what you cannot see. So I think that that's really wonderful way to empower students and it being mutually beneficial, you know, for organisations to also have that expertise from young people. It's something that CMY do really well. I can see Jen has popped in. I just know we have a local CMY our kids are involved with in Gippsland. Would love to find out more about organisations we could connect with though. Yeah, awesome. Abdul, did you want to add some things as well before we wrap up this bit?
Yes. Hi, I'm me. Sorry. Hi, my name is Abdul. I came to this beautiful country years ago as a refugee as well. So I'm addressing to what is the benefit of having external communities and services linked or involved. I think speaking from the very land that we are sitting on is like the connection to our roots are incredibly important because none of us exist in a vacuum. We have a root, which means then the people from different organizations and community organizations allow us a different light or a different perspective, or let's say ability to see how they exist prior coming to Milpera or Australia. So that way we are able to, kind of have a better understanding of our students and what are their values and how do they exist in the way they exist, rather than just this empty vessel that we have to fill with how we think is right for them. Instead, like engaging all of us makes the educational experience much more richer and therefore the more sustainable, so that all of us feel belong, which I think is much more important. And I also work for this Milpera State High School, so with Jackie, so very happy with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Abdul. You raised something so beautiful there that when we, there's a quote around cultural responsiveness, this idea that where we want to engage a young person's ways of learning, being, and ways of being in the world, ways of doing, and ways of learning. And when we do that, we're able to have so much richness, you know, and rather than it being like we're just imparting knowledge, it's really about, you know, creating a container where we can all learn from one another. That's a really beautiful way of putting it.
100%, like exchanging learning rather than just, teaching someone assuming that we know everything. So I think it is important, and it's good for both parties when we engage in a way of I'm willing to learn as much as hopefully I have something to offer too. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And young people are just so incredible. Incredible to work with because of the wisdom that they have. You know, we really, we have so much opportunity to learn from them as well.
100%, couldn't agree more. By the way, I used to study at Noble Park English Language School years ago, just in 2001, just before the world changed in 2001. 9/11 is what I mean.
Wow.
So yeah, that was the last bit.
Wow. Yeah, it's still going. Noble Park English Language School is still going strong.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's great.
Thanks for sharing, Abdul. Appreciate it so much. I'm wondering if in the last just about 5 minutes, if anyone has any questions or comments or thoughts around, you know, some strategies around supporting young people. Hopefully there's a few resources. We can certainly share some more after this session, but wondered if anyone has any questions for the broader group or for us.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in chat or just unmute yourself.
Thanks, Danny. And thanks, Abdul, for sharing as well. I think your school is very fortunate to have your experience and your warmth that you bring to supporting students. I think we're very fortunate when we work with schools, especially those that have the support of bicultural or multicultural education aides, because again, it supports young people from those communities to navigate that space, not just between school and adulthood, but between school and home life as well, bridging those gaps, those intergenerational differences between parents and carers, as well as young people as they come to terms with a new identity and as they continue along their settlement journey.
Thanks, Thao. Let's give another moment or two for any questions.
Sorry, me again. I had a question. What are the challenges that you guys face being engaging or earning the trust of communities to engage into, having the young people over? Because for them, I think for all of us that like when we run away from people so much, trying the first thing is to protect yourself, is not to trust people. And then how do we unlearn to trust again, knowing that maybe this could be risky? And for us, for me personally, it takes me a long time, so I have to be consistent and always um, be honest with them. Doesn't matter how convenient or inconvenient that may be. So that is the best way for me to be able to earn their trust. So what I'm trying to say is, like, how challenging, or what are your challenges with the young people?
Great question, Abdul. We, in our education and early years team, we work with schools and with teachers and bicultural workers and school support staff, who then go on and do the work of connecting and building trust with students and families and young people. And our messaging is exactly the same as what you said. It's consistency, it's respect, it's upholding dignity, it's providing opportunities for families to have agency and control, and acknowledging them as the first of their child's first teacher and the experts in their own children. And really what we emphasize is building partnerships with families in schools, as a way to, connect and support the young person. So everything that you described is what we kind of encourage schools to do. And I think probably with that particular age group with young people, in my context, I decided what I wanted to do when I finished school and went to uni and picked my career. Young people from migrant and refugee backgrounds have got a lot of involvement with families who have vested interest, and that's a much more collaborative approach that needs cultural sensitivity and awareness, to be able to bridge that relationship and to bring family on board. And it really starts with upholding that dignity and respect for families and young people. Thao, anything you'd like to add around building trust with young people or families?
I think, as Jackie pointed out, our greatest resource, but also perhaps our greatest challenge, is time. Time to actually get to know the young person, their stories, their aspirations, and to support them to see the possibilities, but also the multiple pathways to get to their goal, knowing that there can be those additional challenges around in particular, language acquisition, getting to know and navigating those systems. Even as adults who grew up speaking English in Australia, we may still encounter many difficulties navigating those broader systems and processes. And how do we support young people to be able to advocate for their needs as well as for the needs of their communities? I think, as Lindsay said earlier as well, young people are often tasked with the additional responsibility of not just supporting their families, but sometimes speaking on behalf of an entire cultural or language group. So I think one of the things in our work that's challenging is to be able to learn from the diversity of experiences and draw out what those individual nuances are, and always testing our own assumptions. Just because most of the stories we hear about a community reflects a particular experience doesn't mean that it's true for that individual person that we're working with in that moment. So I'm always constantly humbled by the shifting understandings that I have about what it takes to be able to hear people and really see them as individuals and not just a representative of a particular group or community.
Thanks, Thao. And I think that's a great place to wrap up and finish, and just aware of the time. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or thoughts that you have. I put links to our website in the chat and also to our education calendar. We've got some more professional learning taking place in the next this term and next term. So I'll just hand back to Danny. But thanks, Thao, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. And thanks, Danny, for closing for us.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you to our presenters. And everyone who have attended this session. It's lovely to be here. So if you would like to have a certificate of attendance, please email victisol@victisol.vic.edu.au. I believe the link will be in the chat. If you'd like to, we'd like to share your thoughts on this session, and the link to the survey is also accessible in the chat. And in the chat, you will also be able to find our upcoming professional learning sessions in August. Let me jump in. Lovely, it's just coming through now. Thank you, everyone. And also, it's about our symposium. So our 2026 symposium is going to be held on 30th of October at Melbourne University. If you would like to become a member, please access, so all the information is accessible on the chat. Wonderful. Please email Teresa on, just keep jumping. Please email Teresa on plcoordinator@victisol.vic.edu. And thank you again, everyone, for participating in today's wonderful session. Thanks you again for our wonderful presenters. We'll see you next time. Bye.